Hey, welcome back, everyone. JB here with JC, and we're really happy to present our next speaker, which is Jeff Hewitt from Lockton Affinity. Jeff, how you doing today?
I'm great, JB. How are you?
We're good. We're good. We've got a busy day. Thanks for joining us, Jeff. Just so you know, we have over 500 viewers. This is
that's awesome.
Yeah, much better than expected turnout. So thanks everyone for joining. So Jeff, your presentation today is insurance questions FFLs need to know and risk management you should have in place during these challenging times. Obviously very time sensitive for us and part of this crisis presentation. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and Lockton, and we'll go from there.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks to you, JB and JC, for organizing this and putting it together. And welcome to everyone that's tuning in. Hopefully, there'll be some good information here that everybody can take away, and look forward to some questions that come in from the group as well. So, we became a premier partner with FFL Consultants here a few months back, and my responsibility, my role at Lockton Affinity, I'm a program executive, which basically is a program manager. I manage all of our outdoor activities, which are almost all centered around shooting sports, everything from individual gun insurance to clubs to businesses. And today we're going to talk about the business, specifically about the business insurance aspect of what we do. I've been in the insurance business for over 35 years, longer than I care to admit. I've been with Lockton 27 years, and for the last 20 years, I've been managing our Lockton Affinity outdoor brand as it exists in the space. In January of the year 2000, we became the broker for the National Rifle Association insurance program, and I've been in charge of that relationship. And from there, we've continued to expand the products that we have available to folks, in the firearm sales and commercial and membership-driven ranges, which many of you on this call today are fitting into those categories. And we'll talk a little bit about how we've expanded products and how we've walked before we ran, crawled, walked, and ran with the different products that we have today. And we've really built a team of specialists out there and around. So today, what I'd like to take you through, and it's really not an insurance commercial for what we do, it's really more of how do you make your business better? How do you safeguard yourself against claims? And how do you continue to make yourself attractive to an insurance provider so that you can continue to buy insurance at an affordable a cost? Now, some of you would argue whether the cost is affordable or not, but we can get into some of those types of questions as we move on. So I want to talk a little bit about who Lockton Affinity is, talk a little bit about what's going on in the insurance marketplace today. I'm sure some of you have seen some upheaval with current carriers and moving off of your particular insurance or price increasing, those kinds of things. And then talk about the three core insurance pieces that you're buying today, the coverages that you're buying today that really drive your business costs, and how to make yourself safer, and things you need to ask your current agent to make sure that you've got into those things, into those coverage forms. I'll throw out a few claims examples as part of this, the PowerPoint here, just so you can see that we do have real claims and what those claims total up to. I won't be giving any specifics, obviously, but you'll be able to see those. And then, talk a little bit about what the risk management practices are that you can employ to help deter theft or to help deter fires. Slip and falls, all those kinds of things that drive your insurance costs. And then talk a little bit about what's next.
Yeah, Jeff, this is going to be a 45-minute packed session with all types of information. I know, as we've asked with all of our speakers, let's keep our conversation focused on what's on the minds of FFLs and range operators most today, which is, the time sensitivity of the pandemic, the political environment and landscape we're in, we're already hearing a lot about changes in gun laws, and I'm sure Lockton and the insurance industry as a whole is also trying to get their arms around what's next. So that's really important. But the pandemic, this crisis, you and I, we've been through tornadoes. We had claims and clients with floods, tornadoes, smash and grabs, burglaries. So we're just adding one more piece, Jeff, to this conversation, which is a pandemic. I mean,
Yeah.
who knew, right? So, and again, we've worked with you or referred you to many of our clients on past issues, primarily the smash and grab piece. But recently we've had the civil unrest. We had a couple claims with the protesters. And, so in the least, you are very familiar with the firearms industry. So we are very happy to be partnering with you. And I'm sure the audience is going to love hearing about some of the more recent items and claims and issues you've been dealing with. So we'll keep that front and center. So give us a little bit about your client, what's your base and what's it been like for you for the last 20 years that you've ran this program?
Like I said a little bit earlier, we've had over 20 years of experience in the firearm retailer and range segment. And, we started off our coverage offering in that being very restricted to what we were doing. We really sort of focused really only on, gun stores that didn't have gunsmiths. I mean, we were very conservative going into what we were writing. We didn't do a lot of commercial range operations. We were just getting our feet wet with doing retail stores that really were just retail stores. And as we got more comfortable and our underwriting team got more comfortable, we expanded to those, FFLs that also have gunsmiths on staff or do referrals out to gunsmiths. We actually created a gunsmith program that we have to provide the product liability as well as the general liability and things that segment of this business, these businesses need. And then we expanded over to those commercial ranges and folks that are actually doing training, firearm related training, whether they have their own employees doing that training or they're allowing outside instructors to come in. And we'll talk a little bit about how to protect your business from these outside entities coming in that do training, or if you're paying someone on a 1099, how to properly handle those from an insurance standpoint.
So Jeff, I think you're talking about NRA instructors, your range instructors, who come in and do classes or hold special sessions. Is that what you're referring to as third parties? Okay.
Yeah, they could be third party. They could be an NRA certified instructor or not an NRA certified instructor. They might just be certified in the state's concealed carry class. Some of those require an NRA instructor in basic pistol, but other states won't have that requirement. So it's kind of all of those outside folks using your facility, whether it's instructions or you have a group. One of the clients we work with is the well-armed woman. They don't really have any ranges where they go shoot, but they might be using, your ranges that are, some of the folks that are on here today, where they come in and bring their team in, and they may bring an instructor or not. They might just have a social shooting event, but we write all their insurance and we provide lots of certificates out there to range operators, again, to make sure that someone else's insurance is standing in place of yours first for someone else's event.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Jeff. We have a lot of questions. So I want to, first of all, thank the audience for all the questions that were sent in. I remind you to keep sending them in. Your questions will be answered either right here in our presentation. Jeff, JC and I have those questions. We're going to shoot them to you, hopefully during this presentation, and if we don't get to it, but definitely later during our speakers roundtable, which occurs at 4 p.m. Mountain Time today, where you'll be back. Let's focus as you continue on this through that high point of someone else using a range, because a lot of questions came in with that is what type of insurance specifically around a range operation, renters, groups, instructors. It seems like a lot of our audience is concerned about that. And I'm going to ask you later, I know it's in your presentation, I'm going to ask you about the range waiver that everyone signs and whether or not that's really protection against a lawsuit and liability. But I think that's later in your presentation.
Okay. So just, wrapping up a little bit about us, today we have over 4,000 ranges and retail stores that are in our program. That provides, a large body of premium that the insurance carrier would look at, and it creates some aggregated buying power. in the marketplace. So it helps keep our pricing at a more stable level. And we can talk a little bit more about that in terms of the pricing structure later. One of the things that we've developed over the course of all the time we've had in there, we have long tenure at Lockton Affinity. We have, it's a great place to work. We've been awarded for 8 years in a row now the best places to work in insurance, Lockton as a whole and Lockton Affinity as well. So we have a long-term structure there, which really builds out the expertise we have on our sales team and on our customer service team, which are the folks that are going to be talking to people that are sitting on this webinar today, those of you who are out there. And when you talk to those folks, that understanding of your business comes through. And that's something that really helps over time. If, any of you who have called a local agent, not taking anything away from local agents, but called a local agent and said, hey, I've got this federal firearm license, I've got a gun store, and I need some liability insurance and some property coverage. And they say, yeah, we'd love to help you out and tell me more about your business. And they really don't understand it. And then they go out to try to find a reasonably priced market, and they find out that no one wants to write this. There's 3 or 4 carriers that want to write this. They all have different underwriting appetites and different pricing metrics, and it becomes frustrating to talk to a non-specialized agent in this space. And that's really where we come in and help with that.
And it helps with the pricing as well. Am I correct, Jeff?
Yes.
The underwriters, the carriers rather, understand you guys know what you're doing. You have best practices in place for your clients. You screen your clients before you bring them on. You make sure they're doing everything right. And hopefully you rate a good policy, and hopefully we have few claims. Is that the magic equation?
That is the magic equation. That's a good way to think about it. As I mentioned earlier, we've got this, we have underwriting for the long term in mind. As frustrating as it can be to someone who is in the customer service industry and the sales side of it, it's hard to grow incrementally small so that you can continue to grow. This is why we've been able to start offering this type of coverage 20 years ago, and we're still offering it today. And that's, we still want to be involved in that for the next, 20 years.
Great. And
so how do we do that? And that's part of our underwriting mix and expertise. On the prior slide, I've got something that says that, 7 out of 10 folks that call us and talk to us about getting an insurance quote end up buying from us. There's a couple in there that we might underwrite against that we actually don't quote because they don't have good business practices, or you look at their claims information and they continue to have the same types of claims exposures. We give them a target to run to and some advice on how to get better with their current carrier, and then they can come back to us. But we're usually able to match up price and coverage requirements that make a lot of sense versus the competition that's out there. And one of the things we do is we survey about 25% of our insureds each year, and we get about 40% of those that respond back to us. And I just wanted to put up the top 3 reasons why people end up purchasing with us and then they stay with us. The product's well priced, we've got good coverage, and we have a highly specialized team that understands what the folks on this, meeting, really want, what they need and how to speak their language. Today we've got Stacy, David, and Jake, who all work on a team for me, whether you want to call it our sales team or the enrollment side. But between the 3 of them, they're not trying to write a shoe store this morning and maybe write a gun store this afternoon or a range. All they do is gun stores and ranges. That's it. And so, we've got 3 people full-time just on the enrollment side of this, so that we're able to take the time and help each one of those folks out there understand what they need, what drives their pricing, what can make them better. It's more than just sending them a proposal and saying, hey, do you want to sign up? I mean, it's really an education side of that. And I would say Jake is the least tenured guy that's with us, and he's been there for 2 years, but Stacy's been there for 11 and David's been there for 12. So doing exactly what they've been doing. So on a monthly basis, we'll talk to a little more than 100 store owners or range owners from a new business side. And we probably write 70 or 80 new locations a month between the 3 of those folks. So it's like I said, we crawled first and then we walk, and now we're in this phase where we run. So we're excited about the prospects of continuing that type of growth in this program. one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about, some of you on this meeting have probably experienced in the past, is over the last 5 to 7 years, we have seen the carrier markets shrink from 10 probably down to 3. And some of you have gone through being non-renewed by some of those carriers. And then some of you have not been non-renewed. You've been offered a renewal, but the pricing is so extreme that the insurance company is telling you should go shop and move your coverage. And if you're willing to pay the price they put out for you, they're happy to renew you. So that's kind of a corrective action they're trying to do on their book of business because of a loss. Some of the smaller players out there, and when I say it's a smaller player, it might just be a big insurance company, but they've got a small book of this business. And when they have their first policy limit claim, and that gets going up through the different levels at the carrier, they realize, why are we writing commercial gun ranges? Or why are we writing gun stores that have gunsmiths? We've had some claim there, and let's get off of that book of business. So there's really come down to sort of three or four of us that are still in the marketplace today. And I would venture to say, if we're not the biggest, we're very close to being the largest.
Jeff, I'm going to, not to belabor this part of it, but I think also right ahead of us with the election, the political rhetoric we're hearing, the gun control measures, everything you're hearing in the news today, fake news, call it whatever you want, there will definitely be an impact, whether it be political or administratively, on gun control. And isn't it true that a lot of companies are just steering away from firearms altogether? For political reasons or credibility reasons or reputation reasons. You mentioned a lot of, and you're absolutely right. We've had a lot of clients we've referred to you, obviously, because they're getting canceled, their premiums have doubled, or and no fault of their own. Can you shed just a bit of light on what you're hearing with the insurance industry overall for firearms?
Yeah, I would say that predominantly being driven by the media, things around the pandemic. You'll see in the media consistently about the increase in the background checks and record firearm sales. And carriers want to make sure, at least, in one instance, I know it came down from the board of directors level, where a question got asked at a board of directors meeting at a large carrier and said, I understand all this stuff's going on with, let's defund the police, and we've got this pandemic, and we've got these riots going on. We've got people in Kenosha using assault weapons to use to defend themselves. And, we want to make sure we're not writing any of that stuff. Well, they say, well, yeah, we're writing this stuff, and we've had this program in this division for X number of years. And I said, well, we're off of that. There's the political backlash of being associated with the firearm industry. And that tends to come from the more liberal side. We've had another carrier that just simply had an underwriting head retire, and the next person that came in to replace that person is of a different political bent. They're very liberal, and they don't like being in this space. They don't want to understand it, and they're just putting a blinder on to a way to have a profitable book of business in an industry segment, and they're just looking at the industry segment and saying, we don't want any part of that. And again, I think the recent election results, if you'll call them results, what could come in terms of firearm restrictions on sales. Do they want to start making people register firearms? Who knows what they want to do? Hopefully, we'll have some balance in there. Well, there'll be some control with the Senate, because the House and the White House are going to be in a different area. So I just think that there's more to come out of that political environment and what it means to the firearm industry. So let's shift gears here for a little bit. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk a little bit about a couple of coverage things that I think are very important for you to understand and good questions to ask your agent. So general liability, that's our liability to a third party. So whether that be a customer, a trespasser, somebody in our parking lot that might not be a customer, what's our legal liability to injury or damage to someone or something else that we can be brought into suit against. And this is, and I put this up there, this is our largest exposure. When we see, and I'll show you a few claims, we tend to see when something goes bad, there's a fatality or some other kind of debilitating injury that's going to be ongoing, and those tend to be more for policy limit type claims than somebody else that's on your same street that's retailing something else. I mean, when they have a slip and fall or something goes wrong with one of their products that they're selling, they don't tend to have nearly as high claim payment issues as this industry does. And so carriers have to price for that and understand that there's going to be these quote unquote shock losses everywhere around. But there are a couple of key points, I think, that you can ask your current provider to make sure that you've got proper coverage. One of them is to make sure that know the type of coverage you have. So general liability is written on two forms. One is called a broad form and one is called a limited form. So you can forget about those terms already. One is offering what I'd call universal coverage that protects you, employees, other owners, and members. If you're running a range where you sell memberships, those should all be listed as insureds on your policy. Because what's going to happen is if an employee does something on the store's behalf or the range's behalf, or you've got a member of your range that gets involved in something, you want to make sure that they've got protection under your policy. So if a member comes to the range using a range and they're involved in something that causes injury or damage to someone else or something else, and they're held liable, they're going to be named and you're going to be named, and you want your policy to respond to both of those. You don't want to have an individual lawsuit from one of your members or an individual lawsuit from one of your employees because they did something and the policy doesn't protect them. So just look for that and ask your agent about those kinds of things. Broad or limited is really the way that the insurance agent will understand it.
And Jeff, it's important when individuals are going to either renew their insurance or going out for quote, that they're looking at those limits and making sure that they're comparing apples to apples, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that when you're going through the quote process, whether it's with us or someone else, and we often say this to people, we don't care if you white out your insurance premiums so you don't feel like you're giving us, a target to shoot for to be $5 cheaper or something. White those out and send us the policy form so we can tell you what you have and compare it to what we're proposing.
Yeah, because one of the things that we find is people say, oh, wow, these guys are so much cheaper. Yeah, well, they may not be so much cheaper. It just may be your limits are different. Your exposure limits are different.
Yeah, so you could have a policy written. Again, I'll go back to this, and it sounds like I'm bashing local agents, but I'm not. So you could go to someone who's unfamiliar with writing this class of business, and they can't find anyone to write it. So they'll go to an insurance wholesaler who will find them a market. They usually have high minimum premiums. You could spend $5,000 to $10,000 for this policy. And they could say, we're going to give you a limited coverage form for the designated premises and business only. So they're going to say, we've got JC's Firearms, and they're located at 12 Main Street, Denver, Colorado. And we're going to say the designated premises is that location only. We're going to cover JC as the owner, and that's all, and the business. And he's in the firearm business. Well, if you also have a range, or if you have a gunsmith on staff, and those aren't listed in the designated premises and operations, any claim you have coming out of there could not be covered. So you have to look at, where, and it's covering you only for that particular location, where I go back to this comprehensive or universal coverage under the broad form, where it picks up all those things first and foremost, because that's part of your operation. It's an intended or implied part of your operation first. And then secondly is it helps you also protect you and your employees when you're out away from your premises. Whether you go and do some transactions at a gun show, or you're going to a convention and you're going to have a booth, or you're out helping with a community outreach program for other people in the firearm industry, or for a range that's opening up, and any kind of liability you might have associated with that. So it's, again, that's the big point I would look for when you're looking at your policy with your current broker. The other thing, as I mentioned earlier, is you want to make sure that you're presenting yourself in the best way you can as a business to make the insurance carriers want to continue to provide you coverage at an affordable cost. So many of us are going to have outside groups coming to use our facility, whether that be an instructor, a training business, or like I mentioned earlier, another shooting group that doesn't have their own range that they're all members of, and they want to come and use your range once a quarter, like the Well-Armed Woman or Girl with a Gun, any of those other kinds of groups that are out there, or law enforcement that's coming in to do some range time. Make sure that you're getting a certificate of insurance from that organization and listing your business as an additional insured. Okay, we do that all the time for a lot of our insureds, whether they be insured instructors or they be the Well-Armed Woman or a club going to another club for a competition event, friendly competitions among range members, those kinds of things. If anybody from the outside is coming in to use, you want to make sure they have insurance and that you're listed as an additional insured. What that gives you is that if I bring a group in as an instructor and I'm using the range on a Saturday, I use the classroom on Saturday morning and the range for range time on Saturday afternoon. If something happens while I'm instructing, whether it's classroom or on the range, I want to make sure Jeff Hewitt's club or instructing entity that came in to use my range, that his insurance is standing in front of mine. So if there's a claim that happens, and let's say that unfortunately someone else has an accidental discharge and gets shot in the leg and there's $100,000 of medical expenses, you as a range owner or the business owner don't want to have anything to do with paying that. You want to make sure that you're downloading that, because they're going to name you in the suit, right? They're going to make you file a claim, and you're going to say, okay, I've got this. You're going to give the claims adjuster, who we use, here, I have got this certificate, here's the coverage they're with, and then we immediately go to that other entity's insurance provider and say, this claim is yours, and we get you out of it. So you just want to make sure you continue to present yourself in the best case that you're doing safety practices, like always getting certificates of insurance from outside groups, or that you've successfully been able to use those. Again, it's like anything else, whether it's your automobile or your homeowner's insurance, it's all about, am I having claims? Am I continuing to have claims? Is how your insurance provider is going to look at you, just intuitive from that side of it.
Yeah. This is really important to reiterate. It's something we're seeing quite a bit now with ranges. They're either getting some sort of subsidy or some partnership with local law enforcement, especially if local law enforcement was looking to buy a range, but hey, here's a state-of-the-art range. Why don't we just pay to use theirs, or whatever the case may be. We do a lot of range consultation. It's one of the top questions that we ask when we start going through the back office operations is, talk to me about who's using your range. And, are you obtaining those certificates of insurance? And, how does that relationship work? How have you built that relationship? And, it's definitely important to reiterate that, because they just think, oh, this agency is going to give me $10,000, $100,000 to help support in the build out of this range through either a grant or whatever the case may be. And, they still need to protect themselves as a business. So, don't just think, oh, it's a government agency, they'll be protected, right?
Yep. So. Absolutely. Good point, JC. Let's talk a little bit about property coverage. This is intuitive in the sense that it works like your homeowner's insurance. But if you own your building, or you and someone else own it, like the bank, like my house, it's like I own it, but I have to have insurance on it because I've got a mortgage. I need to provide protection so that I've got replacement cost coverage on that. If you got outside lending sources, those are things that are going to help drive your decision of whether or not you buy the property coverage. And you have to consider property coverage in really three ways that I want to point out. One is you've got the real property, the building, and anything that's permanently attached to the building was considered building. So cabinets, display cases that are permanently mounted safes, those are all part of the building. And then you've got your inventory or your contents. That's the stuff that's not attached that you can sell, or someone can steal it by walking out with it from your store. And then you've got something called business interruption insurance. And I'll talk about that in a second here. Variables driving the cost of coverage. The further you are from volunteer or firefighting, fire departments, those kinds of things, construction type of your building, whether it's sprinklered or not, those are the types of things that it just makes sense. If you're not near fire protection, if you don't have sprinklers, there's a number of things that just sort of intuitively drive that cost. What's it made of? Is it a concrete structure? Is it, a frame building, masonry combustible? Those are the different kinds of factors that are go in there. And when you talk to us, we're going to walk you through the building that you own, and we do a cost evaluator on what you would require in today's dollars to replace that building based on square footage, construction type, those kinds of things. So we don't want you to go in and have a co-insurance problem where you've underinsured when you have a total loss, and then it gets really messy between you and an insurance carrier. And usually you come back to us as the agent saying we sold some faulty insurance because we're assessing this penalty from the insurance carrier because we didn't insure it for enough. And we just make sure we get rid of all of those types of variables. I put down there things you can do. So talk to your agent about a couple of different things if you fit into this category. Look at what your deductible on property is on your policy and ask for some additional limit options. So if you have 1,000, look at a 5,000 or a 10,000 deductible and see what kind of cost savings you get on those types of property losses. If you're in a building and you're not using all of the building, or it's an older building, and we walk you through your cost estimator of what it's going to cost to replace that building, you're saying, well, wait a second, I'm not using all the building currently, and if I have to replace this due to a total loss, I don't want to replace it for $2.2 million. I think I could build a really nice $1 million building to serve the purpose I need. I don't need this much of a showroom anymore because I'm doing a lot of sales over the internet, or I do a lot of transfers, and I'm not needing that much inventory today. So whatever the reason may be, you can talk to your agent about putting together what's called an agreed value policy. So I don't have to insure my building for $2.2 million because I'm not going to build the thing back up to the way that it is today from the size and standpoint. Maybe it's got a second floor above it. You don't need that any longer. Whatever those things are, and you can actually pay the premium on a much lower valued building. And that's a way to help minimize those costs as well.
Jeff, we had a lot of questions come in regarding civil unrest, property damage. Not so much, and I know you and I dealt with that couple of smash and grabs in recent months where there was definitely, tremendous amount of front of store damage, building damage, downtime, all that. But is glass becoming an issue with property insurance on gun dealers with burglaries and replacement glass? And then back to your deductible. I mean, I know that deductible sometimes doesn't even cover the glass, right? Or some of these large plate glass windows are thousands and thousands of dollars to replace. So aside from doing an assessment, we've worked with some of your clients, and we've gone out and done the physical security assessments. I don't know if you're going to mention it, but one of the downloads we have available today is the self-assessment for physical security that you can do as a business owner. So again, go to our download page. We've been talking about this all day. Go to the download page at FFLconsultants.com and get all the downloads we talk about today. But is it prudent for the store owner to do their assessment before calling you so that they have a better idea of protection they can put in place before you start writing and reviewing their property for a policy?
Yeah, I think kind of simultaneously is probably good. Let's just face it. I know everyone on this phone call is looking at this as an insurance presentation, and they're like, wait a minute, my insurance doesn't come up until July 1st. And so today I really don't care about it unless I've got a claim, right? It's just like me on my automobile insurance. I really don't pay attention to it until I get the renewal in the mail. So
wait, or until you have an accident.
Yeah, exactly. Then I look for my insurance card and I'm like, where do I call? So, and the folks on this call, on this meeting are probably no different. So I would say that, the two are kind of independent to me. I think that to do the download that you're suggesting, I think is always a great practice. If it coincides with their insurance coming up for renewal at the end of the year here, then I think they could do those simultaneously, because we'll have some ideas and some things that we're gonna throw out there, and I'll talk about one here in a second, which is bollards. But we're gonna help them through that. One of the questions you raised earlier is this whole issue of these rioters that come through and looters and the smashing and defacing of property, and that's certainly something that's covered, at least in our program. And I haven't seen any carrier go out and make any changes at this point on the glass coverage. Needs to have some sort of a coverage form change, because we don't want to cover peaceful protests that end up breaking windows. So I haven't seen any of that come through yet, but I would anticipate if it would continue on, then there would be some sort of a glass deductible that would be at an increased level. So you don't want to have the department store getting tagged 3 times a year, for the glass. They're just going to put the glass deductible at something like 10,000. So you're going to have to take care of that yourself. So.
But certainly something to ask about when your renewal comes up, or if your price increases. These are the questions asked: why and why not, right? Okay.
Yeah. One of the important things I want to make sure that I talk about in this particular area is part of property coverage is a separate coverage within the property form called business interruption insurance. And business interruption insurance will help provide you income at a level that you select in your policy for when you have a covered loss. So if you have a smash and grab, and there's an example of one here coming up, where you have to be closed, your business has to be closed while they're fixing the building and making the changes, or you're getting more inventory in, those kinds of things, then the insurance company is going to pay you a determined amount, and you and your agent will determine that amount. It can be everything, which is the most expensive, which is called actual loss sustained. So it says for 12 months, we're going to give you whatever it needs to keep your business going, even if you have to be shut down because you had a total fire loss. The more affordable ways to do it is to look at your monthly revenues, your top line revenues that are coming in, and maybe buy a 90-day or a 180-day policy that will give you a monthly income replacement back, so you can continue to keep your employees on the payroll, continue to pay your mortgage or your rent, any of those outstanding liabilities you have, continue to pay your insurance, those kinds of things. That business interruption. And that's really a consultative thing that you need to spend a little bit of time with your agent on, and make sure that when I talk about things you can do is to not buy too little or too much. Like I said, the top end of the spectrum is this actual loss sustained, and that's the most expensive. And if you think 180 days worth of coverage or 6 months worth of coverage at $20,000 a month is good, that's going to cost you a lot less. So again, that's just a, run through your books with your agent when you're talking to him about your quote and options that you can look at.
Yeah, Jeff, and that's what I wanted to lastly say here. I think this is an option. Am I right? This doesn't automatically get included in property insurance when you ask for that type of coverage. Or that's at least that's what I'm finding through a lot of the burglary crisis management calls and situations we've dealt with over the last couple of years. An FFL dealer calls us, and we call them the morning of the burglary or the morning after, and we find out they didn't have business interruption insurance, and they didn't even know what that was. So they should be asking for that going forward.
Absolutely, okay. Absolutely, JB. That's a good point. It's not automatically included with most carriers out there, so you've got to ask for it. And if someone's trying to win your business on a really skinny price, that's one of the first things to go. So to talk a little bit about,
talk a little bit about this. I mean, we don't deal a lot with this, but with the range operations, absolutely, right?
Yeah. So, workers' compensation is one of those compulsory things that's required by your state. And you can talk to us and we can tell you what their state requirements are, but some states have a minimum payroll requirement. Some have a minimum number of employees requirement before you have to start buying it. But it's non-health insurance, but it takes care of your liability to employees if they're injured on the job. And it takes care of their employee injuries, and it can take care of any lost time from work if they have to do that. And there's some deductibles or waiting periods there for them to get wage replacement. And then there's also, if there becomes some sort of permanent or partial disability that's going to be ongoing, then it'll take care of ongoing expenses from that side of it. But again, that's why if you go to the doctors or to the emergency room or whatever, they're going to ask, is this a work-related injury? Because they're going to either file it on health insurance or they're going to file it against your workers' compensation or your employer's workers' compensation if you're covered by somewhere else. This is a very simple calculation. It's payroll for that class code of business times a rate. And there'll be a difference here for this group. So if you just have a store and no range operations, then you're paying a retail rate. So your counter workers, managers, all of those kind of things are paying the same rate as the shoe store down the street in terms of what workers' comp rate. When you have a range and you have employees that are going to go out onto the range, you have range safety officers, then you get into a different classification that's a little more hazardous and you're going to pay more because the risk of injury is there. And that's just the way those work. And the beauty of the way that all of the states are set up around the country is each one has its own state insurance department. And they all have a little bit different rules. And that's very similar to what happens here with workers' compensation. So if you're in California, inherently you're paying a higher rate because it's got very rich benefits versus a store in Texas. Texas has low rates because they have low benefits for workers' comp related injuries. So you can shop around and find different carriers that are going to find different things, but different pricing. So it's worth your while to shop around. The last thing I'll
go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, it's just to say the last thing I was going to say there is, as an owner of the store or an executive of the store, you can opt out of workers' compensation. Again, that depends on the state that you're in, but you can take yourself out of that payroll calculation, which helps you reduce costs. But I would not do that unless you've got a disability program in place for something else that might cover you for your injuries for that. JC, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the important things that I do want to call out about this is a lot of the folks attending the events here today that operate ranges, many of them do use their employees to do either minor all the way up to major kind of cleaning of the range operations and things like that. But many utilize an outside firm, or even I've had several that utilize just outside individuals. And something that's important to call out relative to workers' compensation is that you as a range need to ensure that if you have those third-party contractors that are working on your range, doing lead mitigation, things like that, that they have the proper coverages in place for their employees. Because we've seen it in the past where a business is using that third party and that third party didn't have insurance, and then all of a sudden the business is the one getting the attention and the focus as far as claims.
Yeah, that's well said. Again, it goes back to that. When anybody else that's a business type operation coming on to your facility, you should ask for a certificate of insurance.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing, our partner MT2 on this event today, certainly not a commercial, but it's important that you're utilizing organizations such as MT2 and getting that insurance. So,
yep.
Hey Jeff, for the sake of time and our audience, I think we have to try to wind these down. So JC and I are not going to ask any questions about the next couple of slides.
Okay. Well, they're pretty self-explanatory. I alluded to them a little bit earlier. So I put 2 general liability examples and 2 property examples. So here's just a case, again, back in 2017, where accidental discharge happened in a store. You can see what we paid, which was the policy limit. And then there was an additional $179,000 basically in defense and expenses, and that's the outside legal fees, which they don't encumber the limit that is available for a settlement to a third party. So you can see there back in 2015, and we had an accidental range shooting. We have a customer with not a lot of experience, which I'm thinking we're going to start seeing more and more of an uptick in this as we have these record gun sales and new shooters coming in. So we just have to be responsible as range owners to gauge people and ask their position around, are they familiar with the range? Are they familiar with their firearm? Do they need a range safety officer to be there with them? You can see here, we again paid a policy limit, and it was an additional $41,000 in defense and expense for those GL claims. As far as property examples, again, I talked a little bit about the first one, which is it's a larger smash and grab. Stole a vehicle, smashed it through the front of the store, got in. They only got $18,000 worth of property, of inventory, but there was an $84,000 bill to fix the damage to the building, and then another $14,000, almost $15,000 of extra expense, which is that, we were closed for 3 weeks because we had to get our store fixed, and it was a covered cause of loss. So that's that, again, that business interruption insurance kicking in to help make sure that you can continue to keep your guys on payroll, and they're not out looking for another job or anything like that. Unfortunately, a common one that we see, we've probably had 3 or 4 of these in the last 2 years. Someone comes in, uses a prohibited tracer round or some incendiary, ammunition, and the whole building goes down. And those typically happen when we've got, somebody that's on the range. There's nothing that happens during that evening when the people are shooting, but we've closed the store and now we're left. And sometime overnight, it finally gets to a heat that it can combust itself. And that's what happens. We see a lot of either tracer rounds type building burns. And we also see, just improper maintenance on rubber backstops is another one that we see that tie into common. They tend to be the biggest common factor in total building losses we have with range operators. So talk a little bit about what we can do from a risk management standpoint. I mean, JB and JC provide you guys with lots of opportunities and advice on the OSHA compliance side of things. Posted store and range safety rules. Like I said, we've got these new gun owners. If put up your hand and ask for help. So some other signs that you can put up, that we feel whether these are true or not, they still have an active role in risk management from your side. So a sign that says all firearms are stored in a safe or vault after hours. Whether that's true or not, I don't think we've had a theft case that happened after business hours where the folks that did the theft weren't in the store a time or two before looking for these kinds of things. Security cameras are in place and recording. You see those signs in different places. Smile, you're on camera. That's a real deterrent. And then central station reporting alarms. We're seeing more and more, insurance carriers give credits on the property if you install bollards in front of your store. Or if you can provide, like us as an example, if you can provide us a picture of your store that we know that it's raised up enough or the curb's high enough, they put bollards in, or they might have gone out and bought 4 big cement planters that they've planted trees in or something that deterrents to trying to drive something through them to get to access into your store. So talk to your carrier about, if you've got those installed, what kind of credit can I get, or how can I get those, and how do I properly place them? We'll walk you through those on when we're giving you an insurance quote. Proper range maintenance and backstops, on the rubber backstops rather, and then the use of range safety officers. I know that one of the best practices out there is range safety officers. I know when I go and take my son who's newer to the shooting sports, generally the range safety officer's over there, and he's got his eye on him, knowing that just looks like a new shooter, so they're over there helping, making sure that he understands what dad's telling him, which they don't tend to listen to dad sometimes. Everything's downrange. Here's how you rest it down, all those kinds of things that are intuitive to people like that shoot all the time, but it's getting that through there. So
Jeff, I'm glad you brought up the 12, NSSF. As you guys know, we work with the NSSF as well, but more than 12 million firearms sold this year, and still counting. More than 5 million new gun owners, many of whom, don't even know how to clean a gun. So there's a great opportunity there for classes and education, but the RSOs really need to be keenly aware of this population, over the next few months and even a year as folks come in for lessons and learn how to shoot their firearm.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Jeff, we've got to come to a close. So wow,
Yeah.
So much great information. Thank you. We're going to hit you up later during the Q&A with all of the speakers roundtable, with all of the other questions we didn't ask. We've got a long list, so thank you everyone for sending those in. So how do folks get in touch with you, Jeff?
Well, this is the only slide you have to remember. Obviously, we're based in Kansas City, and our partner website is locktonaffinityOutdoor.com/FFLC. FFLC, and then we've got a toll-free number there. So either one of those things, you'll call in, talk to a live attendant at our reception desk, and they'll direct your call to whether you want to talk to me or whether you want to talk to, Stacy or David or Jake, if you want to talk specifically about how your business insurance works today and can work potentially for you.
Great, Jeff. And we, like I said, we've got the special download for you guys, our very own security and risk self-assessment. So you can do that before you, as you start to plan your capital for security improvements and to reduce your insurance premium. So Jeff, great information, and we'll get you on another future webinar to answer more questions and talk to our folks. And again, just go out to our FFLconsultants.com page and get that download. JC, who's up next?
All right, our next session is with Wendy Christie, the owner of Employer eSource. She's going to be covering hot topics firearms industry employers need to know about during times of crisis.
Great.
So stay tuned for that.
So Jeff, we want to thank you. We'll go ahead and say goodbye to everyone now. We'll see the rest of you at the top of the hour. And Jeff, we'll see you again at 4 p.m. Mountain Time.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll see you guys then. Thanks, JB and JC, and thanks for everybody else that's out there that participated in this, and I'll look forward to answering some of your questions.
See you guys soon.
Bye-bye.